joined now by one of the Democratic senators backing this bipartisan bill, Wisconsin Senator Tammy Baldwin. Senator Baldwin, welcome back to Meet the Press.
It's lovely to join you.
Thank you. Let me start with the defense that TikTok CEO makes. Do you think it's a good enough reason to keep TikTok afloat simply because it's too big to ban?
Look, I think that users of TikTok, and we'll speak in a moment about the bill that we've introduced, which deals with far more technologies than just TikTok. But I think users need to know who has access to their data, their whereabouts, where it's stored. Is this going to be shared with competitors and adversaries in China? And I think people really need to know the risk of these technologies. And so the Restrict Act, which we introduced recently on a bipartisan basis in the Senate, sets up a framework in the Department of Commerce, but tapping into other agencies to really understand the threats and risks posed, not just by TikTok. That's today's concern. Tomorrow it'll be a new technology. Next week, it'll be another one. And we need to be able to assess and then mitigate the risk and harm that could happen to Americans, especially when we don't know, because there's not transparency about where our data is going, whether people can engage in identity theft or surveillance. These should be concerns shared by every American.
Is your concern greater with TikTok on the data collection front, or the fact that it might be an extraordinarily effective influence operation?
I think I can see concerns on both sides. And, again, with future technology, it might be a greater concern about surveillance versus identity theft versus malign influence. So I think we need to be concerned on all fronts, and that individual consumers need to have information about the risks that these technologies pose, if any. But that's why we need to have a framework to evaluate that.
Yeah, I've wondered if you simply put a warning label, when I went to the App Store, and if I put TikTok on my phone, would you be satisfied with a warning label that said, the Chinese government owns a piece of this company? Keep that in mind when you decide to download this. But this is America, and we're going to let you make your decisions.
Yeah, so as you know, Congress is looking at a variety of pieces of legislation. One that's been offered that I'm not associated with would outright ban TikTok. This really provides information, but also tools to mitigate, up to and including banning a technology, but we're not there yet. And I think that, a warning label might not be sufficient, but I think if there was a widespread understanding that certain technology was being used to spy on you, there might be a great concern about installing that in your home, or using it in day-to-day activity.
Because the question I have is, does government ownership, a foreign government ownership, enough to make it a ban? So, for instance, you go down this line, the Saudi sovereign fund is a huge investor in Twitter. Should that be allowed? Telegram, I believe the Russian sovereign fund is a big investor in Telegram, right? What's the difference?
Yeah, so I think you got to break this down. Let me start just by focusing on the Chinese government. Because I represent a state that makes things. And I know that we have had our manufacturers and our workers on an unlevel playing field because the Chinese government can invest in their firms and manufacturers and industry and make it possible to produce products for far less. They can dump them and drive Wisconsin businesses out of business. So I look at Chinese investment in certain businesses as creating risks well beyond the ones that we've just been talking about, actually driving companies out of business and putting workers out of work. So I've looked at the involvement of the Chinese government as an investor in private business for a long, long time, and I've had various concerns over time. We have allies that may invest in certain businesses that don't cause me to be concerned about Wisconsin workers losing their jobs, et cetera. So I do think that's why the Restrict Act is so sensible, because it sets up a framework that you and I aren't making these snap judgments. They are looking carefully, first of all, the transparency of where data is stored, who has access to it. Are they potentially using our private information for identity theft or surveillance? Do they know our movements? All these sort of things that average Americans and consumers should know when they make a decision about downloading an app, purchasing a technology to keep us safe.
You know, the thing that the thing that's most concerning when I watch this situation, the more I've learned, I've spent time with TikTok's executives, is everything they're doing to try to make the case that they're protecting data of American users is actually more expensive than divesting. And the fact that they won't divest feels like they want to go the more expensive route. What would be better for their business would be divestment, and the fact that they won't do it, does that not concern you?
It does, and I would hope when we pass the Restrict Act and set up this framework in the Commerce Department that we're going to be scrutinizing all of these decisions and getting answers so that we're not in the dark when we purchase technologies, download apps, and subject our personal data to potential malign use.
Let me ask you this, because this is something the TikTok users say. Glad you're worried about the Chinese with my data, but what bill are you going to pass that makes sure Instagram doesn't abuse my data?
Yeah, it's a very fair question. And frankly, one of the interests I've had over a long haul is making sure that even the U.S. government has a lot of our data. What about hacks and breaches where that's gotten out? We need to be careful to safeguard our data, even when it's in U.S. hands, or whether that's private sector or government. These are critical issues in the 21st century.
They sure are. Well, I think we all want our Privacy Bill of Rights. We just got to figure out what's in them. Senator Tammy Baldwin, Democrat from Wisconsin, appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective with us. Thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.